Hello, everybody. Hello, Hidden Gems. How is everyone doing? It is, for me, it's my fifth live stream here on YouTube of the day. So, you sick of me yet? Um, if you are, I completely understand. Don't hold anything against you. For those, hello, gossip, rumor, and innuendo. I am so glad you are here and awake for now. I too am here and awake. I'm sipping some honey water, feeling good. A rumor from our last live, because we're covering the Brian Koberger sentencing, that my producer, who many of us know and we all appreciate her grace in, that it was her birthday. It is not her birthday. She wants to make that clear. She's receiving a bunch of happy birthday wishes on Facebook right now. False alarm, not her birthday. Trust me. That would be, I would be working her really hard if it was her birthday right now. So, um, false alarm, but I'll let you all know when it is, come May. And I just want to thank everybody for their support while we have one of the busiest weeks I think we might have ever had here at Hidden True Crime. We certainly have very many busy weeks, many busy days, but all of these cases that we cover, uh, that we are so passionate about, so much is happening, and we are traveling, and we are trying our best to make sure that you are updated. So thank you to everyone that is supporting us here at Hidden True Crime. And this James Craig trial, which we care so much about, that does not have cameras in the courtroom, but because we were able to get credentialed as media, we can bring you everything that is happening behind the scenes. And we have the latest for you today. Sugar babies on the stand, by the way. And it's not me that calls them sugar babies. They are wonderful women who have come forward as witnesses to help in justice. It is the court that has referred to them as sugar babies because of this website called seekingarrangement.com, where Dr. James Craig, a dentist, was very active in letting women know that they could seek an arrangement where he would help them, and with financial means where they were struggling, and in return, if they could give him a relationship of sorts. Seekingarrangement.com. So we have a big update to you on the James Craig trial with these quote unquote seeking arrangement sugar babies. Wonderful witnesses who are helping in the prosecution in their goal of justice for Angie Craig. Angie Craig, they say, was murdered by her husband, Dr. James Craig, with multiple poisons. Multiple. We've heard about cyanide, arsenic, Visine eye drops, over a long period, chronic poisoning. So if you are new to this case, thank you for being here as we continue on. And court picked up today with the cross-examination of Casey Bohannan. So yesterday's chapter ended with the prosecution questioning Casey Bohannan, the jailhouse informant who met James Craig behind bars. And at the time, Casey was already in jail for a misdemeanor when James got arrested. They were both initially in the medical unit, and according to Casey, James wasted no time trying to strike a deal. James allegedly offered to bail Casey out and give him free dental work, all in exchange for a huge favor. He wanted Casey to plant fake evidence. James would write a journal in Angela's handwriting, making it seem like she was possibly going to self-harm and struggling with the divorce. And then Casey was supposed to sneak the journal into James's garage or his pickup truck. He even sketched out a map of his house showing Casey where to avoid the security cameras, but Casey wanted nothing to do with it. He said that he flushed those maps down the jail toilet, and later he went to authorities. Jailhouse snitch. Today it was the defense's turn, though, to dig into Casey's story and into this alleged jailhouse snitch's story. And they had Casey walk the jury through quite a bit. 1 second. So let's dig in. The defense had Casey walk the jury through what it's like when you first arrive at jail. He said they strip you down, take away your street clothes, your personal belongings, everything. You're given jail issued clothing and shoes, and that's it. When Casey got there, he wasn't just thrown into general population, he was taken straight to the medical unit. He was in a neck brace recovering from a neck fusion surgery, and he was also an alcoholic. And because of his condition, he was placed in the medical unit and put on controlled substances to manage the pain. But he told the court the pain meds he was given in jail were much weaker than what he had been prescribed at home. The defense asked if he'd experienced alcohol withdrawal, and Casey actually said no. He also testified that he was familiar with how bonds work in jail. You get a hearing, a judge sets a bond, and the DA can argue to raise or lower it. But Casey already knew no one on the outside was going to come and help him. His family wouldn't even take his calls. But then came along James Craig. Casey said he learned what James was in for and about his plan to plant evidence, but he sat in jail all through April, May, and into the first week of June without telling anyone. He didn't come forward with what James allegedly told him until after he was already out. Casey explained that the medical unit at the jail was completely separate from the rest of the facility. The cells are different. The setup is different. You've got access to a TV during day room hours. You can make phone calls, pick out a book. It's a little bit more relaxed compared to general population or Gen Pop. It was while he was still in medical that he first saw the headline in the newspaper. What was that headline? Colorado dentist arrested. And that was his first indication of why James had even been taken into custody. But at that point, Casey didn't know the full story. Not yet. Casey's cell was not right next to James's. There were two cells in between them. And by the time June rolled around, Casey had been moved out of the medical unit. And after that, he didn't see or interact with James again. And then, though, on July 13th, after Casey had been released from jail, he decided to come forward. He sent an email to the district attorney's office saying he had information about James Craig. And well, that message was then passed on to Detective Olson, Detective Bobby Olson, who's already taken the stand, the incredible Detective Bobby Olson. But she didn't hunt Casey down. She just simply responded saying, hey, if you want to talk, reach out. So what did Casey do? He reached out. They scheduled a call for July 14th. And that's when he finally shared what he knew. And during his call with Detective Olson, Casey admitted that he knew he had a new probation violation hanging over him. He told her straight up he was planning to turn himself in because, in his words, it was coming down the pipe. It was for a class 1 misdemeanor, something that could carry up to a year in jail and a $1,000 fine. So maybe this is why, according to the defense, he was finally coming clean to get a deal. But now on redirect, prosecution again, the state again. And the state pushed back on what the defense had been suggesting, that Casey only came forward with information about James to try to get himself a deal. But when they asked him directly, Casey didn't hesitate. He said, absolutely not. He didn't get anything in return for coming forward. And in fact, he ended up serving time on that probation violation, not getting a deal. And the state pointed something else out, that if James hadn't really asked Casey for help, and this was just made up to get himself a deal, how would Casey have known so many specific details? And what were the details he knew? Well, the fact that James drove a lifted Ford truck, or that James's house had surveillance cameras, or that Angela was allegedly considering self-harm, or even the door code to James's house and truck. All of that would have had to come from James himself. And the next up on the stand was Michael Fod, a registered nurse since 2016 at the University of Colorado Hospital. Let me take a quick drink. I am drinking some honey water, by the way, and a cough suppressant. We're figuring it out. If anybody saw me sneak in a little pill, don't worry. We're keeping my cough at bay. we're finding some solutions. Next up, again on the stand, was Michael, a registered nurse since 2016. He works at the University of Colorado Hospital, specifically in the outpatient orthopedic center that's connected to the main hospital. But back in March of 2023, he was working his very first shift at UC Hospital when he crossed paths with Angela Craig. And what he walked into when he crossed paths with Angela Craig was absolute chaos. Angela's condition was already dire by the time Michael saw her. Her pupils were blown, her brain was showing signs of what is described as brain death, and her intracranial pressure had skyrocketed to 90. So Michael performed some blood draws on Angela around 8:20 p.m. on March 15th, and then the state entered Exhibit 230 into evidence, a portion of Angela's medical records, specifically tied to those blood draws. They focus in on 2 samples, and Nurse Michael read out the specimen ID numbers on the stand. That was it. No further questions from the prosecution. So allegedly, his role was pretty simple. Lay the foundation of those critical blood samples. And the defense had no further questions. The next witness made a striking entrance wearing a jail-issued jumpsuit, shackled in handcuffs and chains. He did not look thrilled to be in the courtroom. But once he started talking, his demeanor began to soften. His name? Nathaniel Harris, but he goes by Nate. So Nate first met with the prosecution while he was locked up at the Denver County Jail. He had written a letter to the court wanting to know if his deal was still valid. He made it clear that he only wanted to testify in this case if he wasn't still in custody. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. Since then, Nate is now facing new charges, including motor vehicle theft and forgery. So no, he couldn't. He couldn't avoid being incarcerated. And he told the court that he hasn't signed any kind of cooperation agreement. He was not promised anything in return for his testimony. He said that he was there because his wife asked him to be. He explained that his wife, Loretta, told him that testifying was the morally right thing to do. She believed that Angela Craig deserved the truth to come out and that Nate needed to speak up. Thank you, Loretta. And now Nate has a bit of a complicated past, as you can guess or speculate. He has an ex-wife too. And his ex-wife's name is Kazzy or Kaziana. As for his connection to James Craig, they were cellmates. In November of 2024, Nate and James were housed together in Pod 2C at the county jail. It was an open-style minimum security pod with 5 bunk beds to a cell. They had room for basic items like commissary and paper goods. And over time, the two of them started talking about life and about their cases. James told Nate that he'd been charged with murdering his wife. But according to James, Angela was suicidal. He told Nate that he had ordered poisons to help his wife end her life. He also claimed that the sheriff's department was stacking the deck against him. Nate told the court that he and James would often talk while walking laps around the pod, and that's where most of their conversations happened. Over time, they opened up to each other. Nate shared stories from his own past, including his time in prison, and James is very interested in that part. According to Nate, James was looking for someone who could help him handle the last person he'd dealt with in the jail's medical unit. He also wanted someone to fabricate details about his case, essentially to fix the evidence and reshape the narrative. Nate recalled that James mentioned 2 other inmates, possibly named Roderick and Tommy, but he couldn't remember exactly. And Nate also clarified that he was never in the medical unit himself, but the name Casey Bohannan still sounded familiar. Nate also made it clear he didn't go around chatting with other inmates about what James was telling him. He said, the kind of talk turns into situations like this. And he added that talking about killing people isn't usually part of his conversations behind bars. No, it's not, no matter what people think. But with James, it came up. They also talked about Nate's ex-wife, Kazzy. According to Nate, James was hoping to find someone who could create fake stories, something to reinforce his version of events and throw investigators off track. Nate had once told James that Kazzy had photoshopped and fabricated evidence for him in the past. James apparently took that seriously. Nate testified that James somehow got Kazzy's address and gave him a letter to send to her. But oddly, the letter wasn't addressed to Kazzy, it was addressed to someone else. The letter James gave Nate was actually addressed to Nate's own attorney, a man named Sam Alleron. But inside the envelope was a letter meant for Kazzy. James instructed Nate to mail it to Sam so Sam could pass it along to her, to Kazzy. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Okay. Nate said, make sure that, okay, are we back? All right. So Nate said that he never actually read the letter that was supposed to go to Kazzy, his ex-wife. Not at first. It wasn't until the letter was confiscated from his cell during a surprise pod-wide search that he saw what was inside. The search was supposedly a sweep looking for Suboxone, a medication often used to treat opioid withdrawals, but that letter got confiscated as well. Nate was later pulled aside by a sergeant and questioned about the letter. And Nate testified that James also talked a lot about who? Detective Bobby Olson. According to Nate, James believed that she was out to get him, said she was lying about him, fabricating evidence, twisting things against him, twisting the truth, and then it escalated. James allegedly asked Nate to help him find someone to kill Bobby Olson and his former medical cellmate. He figured Nate, having done time in prison, might have the right kind of connections to make that happen. But Nate never had any intention of following through. He told the jury he only said, "I'll handle it," because he didn't want James spreading that kind of talk around the pot. He was worried James might actually find someone willing to do it, and he wanted to shut it down before it got out of hand. James said money wasn't an issue. Nate testified that James mentioned a blank check. He'd start the offer at $20,000 and go up from there, but it didn't stop. With Detective Olson, Nate testified that James also had it out for Deputy Hillstrand. He said Hillstrand had treated him horribly, and James wanted revenge. There was a plan, Nate said. James wanted Nate to track Hillstrand's son, take pictures of the boy getting off the school bus just to intimidate the deputy. He wanted Nate to reach out to James's own son, Tolliver, to try and gather info on where Hillstrand might be and how to track down Bobby Olson. Nate also recalled James mentioning a storage unit. Inside, he said, there was an F-150 pickup truck, supposedly loaded with cash, and a sniper rifle. Nate couldn't say whether that was true or not. He'd never seen it, but James talked about it like it was real and that timing was urgent. James allegedly told Nate the hit on Bobby Olson needed to happen before his trial started. Time was running out and he was getting desperate. Nate didn't tell anyone at the jail about what James had asked him to do until that letter was discovered during the cell search. And once he knew the letter had been confiscated, Nate then told his ex-wife, Kazzy, she was furious, completely blindsided, wanted nothing to do with it. But even before the letter was found, Nate had confided in someone else, his wife, Loretta. He told her what James had asked of him because by that point, he wanted the letter gone. His plan was to get rid of it and make it seem like he had just sent it to Kazzy just to keep James from pressing further. And during his testimony, the state asked, did James ever talk about a timeline for the hit on Bobby Olson? Nate didn't hesitate. Yes, he did. He said James made it clear it was urgent. He wanted it handled right away. No further questions. Cross-examination, though, got tense fast. The defense started by painting a picture of what jail life is really like. And Attorney Whitham asked Nate if he agreed that jail wasn't exactly a safe or pleasant place to be, and Nate did not argue. He said that's exactly why he hadn't wanted to testify while still in custody, because when you're labeled a snitch behind bars, things can go sideways and fast. He'd done 10 years in prison. He knows how things work. Newer inmates might be scared, but he's been around long enough to handle himself. He wasn't going to be a snitch. But from there, things took a sharp turn. Whitham zeroed in. You're a convicted felon with an active case pending. Is that correct? Nate simply answered, yes. Take a quick break. 1 second. Things are looking up for me. All right. Okay. So Whitman zeroed in that he was a convicted felon with an active case, and Nate answered that he was. And she then brought up his relationship with his wife, Loretta, suggesting it was rocky, but Nate disagreed. Whitman pressed further. You've sent messages to your wife through the jail tablet. Is that right? And in those messages, you accuse her of cheating when she missed visits. Nate didn't deny it, sure. Are you going somewhere with this? Nate shot back. Whitman snapped back. I'll ask the questions, you answer. She kept going, asking how he would describe his relationship with Loretta. And Nate responded, it was up and down, like you said. Then she hit on something more pointed. You told Loretta you were coming home the day after the cell search, after the letter was found. Nate confirmed he had, but he also told her that he was coming home more than just that occasion. Whitman asked if at that time he was even able to post bond. Nate admitted, not at that time, but I eventually did. Whitman pointed out, miraculously, you were suddenly able to post bond after that letter surfaced because you thought the information you had, what you're testifying to today, might help you. You even told Kazzy you planned to use it to your benefit. Nate responded, sure. Whitman, so you knew it was valuable to the prosecution, didn't you? Nate pushed back. I didn't know that. I hadn't even spoken to them yet. But Whitman wasn't letting up. You've done time. You know when people have dirt on someone, it can be valuable. And Nate didn't miss a beat. If it was that valuable, would I still be in handcuffs? Whitman fired back. Well, that's because you picked up another case, right? Nate, I sure did. And that's why you're still in custody now, right? And then came the question, do you consider yourself reliable? Nate answered coolly, if you have a handwritten letter, that's pretty reliable. Whitman leaned in. You don't like Mr. Craig, do you? You've been staring him down all day. Nate shrugged. I've been looking around, but no, I don't like him. They moved on to how the information was shared, those walks around the pod. Nate told the jury that the pod had more than 50 inmates, all out at the same time. He said, Dr. Craig followed me around like a puppy. Whitman shot back. That's not what you told the state. You said you were just walking together. Nate replied, the state didn't ask me that. And then came the core of her argument. You could have called a deputy, filed a report, turned over the letter, but you didn't. You kept it in your cell. You controlled when and where it would be found. Nate didn't argue. He explained that he had his wife call the jail and request the search, made it look like they were looking for some medication so it wouldn't seem like he was snitching. Whitman summed it up. So you made up the decision when and how that letter would be found. Nate replied simply, yes. Whitman zeroed in again. Let's talk about your current case, motor vehicle theft and forgery. You say you haven't been promised anything for your testimony, but that's not exactly true, is it? Nate didn't hesitate. That is true. I was offered something, but I didn't take it. The defense then introduced an exhibit, a letter Nate had written to the judge handling his case. It read, Your Honor, I request to be seen in video court on this matter. I recently provided information in a murder case in exchange for a probation deal in this case, end quote. Well, Nate then made it clear he ultimately chose not to take that deal. Whitman then zeroed in on Nate's credibility and what he might have to gain. She said, you currently have a probation violation pending in Denver. Is that correct? But Harris shot back. That is incorrect. So Whitman pulled out the paperwork, official documents showing a pending probation revocation hearing set for July 31st. Harris clarified, quote, I signed a deal for a restatement, end quote. Whitman pressed him, but you don't actually know what's going to happen, do you? And what did Nate say? Of course not, he admitted. Whittem went further. Quote, "It's your understanding that prison is off the table in your latest Denver case, right?" "Correct," Harris answered, "but it has nothing to do with this case." And then came another offer. Whittem revealed that Harris had been given the chance to plead guilty to a lesser charge and go through Veterans Court. But Harris turned that down. "The deal didn't work for me," he said. Whittem then walked the jury through the bigger picture. After Harris gave up information about James Craig, he was released only to catch a new drug charge shortly after. He pled guilty. That charge could have landed him in prison for 8 to 32 years, but now prison off the table. Whittem laid it out plainly. You were offered a deal, pled to a lesser charge, and testify. Harris didn't deny it, but he said, "I refused it," he said, not because of the part about testifying, but because the overall offer just wasn't right for him. Whittem said, "You know what happens to snitches in prison." But Harris didn't flinch. He stared straight ahead and said, "Do I look worried?" He told the jury that if the deal had been fair, he would have signed it, snitch label or not. Whittem reminded everyone that while Harris was still in custody, he had told the DA he wouldn't testify because, excuse me, Whittem reminded him and reminded everyone that while Harris was still in custody, he did tell the DA he wouldn't testify because of the danger that comes with being labeled a snitch behind bars. But now in court and under oath, Harris said he's testifying anyway, not because of a deal, because he said it's the right thing to do. The state had no redirect. Interesting to me. No redirect. And next to take the stand was Sergeant Nicholas Hudson from the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office. And these days, he's responsible for transporting inmates to court. But back when James Craig was first behind bars, Hudson worked the graveyard shift at the jail. One night on duty, Hudson got a call. The woman on the line identified herself as Loretta, Nate Harris's significant other. Loretta was worried. She told Hudson that Nate had a letter she claimed was from James Craig. And that call kicked off a quiet investigation. Hudson didn't waste any time. He made his way to Pod 2, where Nate and James were housed, and began searching the cell. But he had to be careful. If word got out that he was looking for evidence tied to an inmate cooperating in a high-profile murder case, Nate's safety could be at risk. So Hudson came up with a cover story. To throw off suspicion, he told the other deputies he was searching for a medication, a common contraband drug in jails. They didn't know the real reason behind the search. Hudson kept it tight, on a need-to-know basis in order to protect Nate. And during the search, Hudson found what he was looking for. Inside a legal envelope marked with the name Sam was on the envelope, was a letter, the one Loretta had told him about. Then came the letter. It was 11 pages long, and the prosecution entered it into evidence. The opening paragraph read, "Hey, Kazzy, I know you don't know me, and I don't know you. I hope you'll forgive the presumptive stance, as I'm assuming Nate's opinion of you as a reliable, capable person is true. I would never normally be this trusting, but I have no choice." James told Kazzy he was being unjustly accused of a heinous crime, that the police were fabricating evidence against him, and since they were playing dirty, he said he had no choice but to do the same. He said, in quote, "Fighting fire with fire to clear my name and get back to my kids." And then he made an offer. And this is it. There will be, of course, a financial incentive. I know you don't need my money, but I want to offer $20,000 per witness you can find. He wasn't just asking Kazzy to lie for him. He wanted more people. He asked Kazzy to be one of the witnesses and to get her sister involved too. "If you can find another one, that's great," Craig wrote. "I'll pay you when I'm out and my assets are unfrozen. Thank you in advance for making me and my kids the happiest people on earth. Signed, Jimmy Craig." But then the letter took a darker turn, if it's not dark enough. James didn't just ask for help. He laid out an entire script. He gave Kazzy detailed instructions on what to say, what role to play, and how to make it all sound believable. He fed her personal details about Angela so she could seem like someone who actually knew her. It was calculated, specific, manipulative. And then came the offer of a bonus. Craig said he'd pay extra if she could go a step further, if she could Photoshop photos and doctor phone logs to make the lies look real. He also said, we have to discredit Detective Olson. Say you told her the whole story and she berated you, said she didn't believe you, and threatened you to keep quiet. So now you have no choice but to come forward. He even wove in a backstory involving Kazzy's sister, saying she used to see Angela doing genealogy at the family history library, and that's how they became friends. Then came more instructions. He told her to find someone who could say they'd seen her sister with Angela at the library, someone who could act like a real witness. And if possible, they should actually go to the library to get the details right, to sound authentic. But with that, James still wasn't done orchestrating the lies. He asked Kazzy to find another friend, someone who would say they were close to Caitlin Romero, one of the women who worked at James's dental practice. He described Caitlin as having a plump, pretty face and claimed she'd recently been bragging that she set him up. He said that Caitlin may have fabricated evidence tied to his case, that she had something to do with manipulating his search history at work, and he even accused her of being the one who ordered the cyanide that killed Angela. So yeah, now that's Caitlin Romero who ordered it. And according to his story, Caitlin was put up to it by her boss, Ryan Redfern, that he had offered her a financial incentive to do it. During cross-examination, Whittam shifted the focus to jail operations, specifically the surveillance and documentation inside the facility. Hudson said that there are cameras all throughout the jail unit. When inmates walk through the day room, those movements are captured on video. He also said that the state had asked him for housing records related to James Craig, but Whittam pointed out something surprising. Detective Olson never requested the actual footage from those day rooms. She never asked for proof that James had been housed with either Casey Bohannan or Nate Harris. Hudson replied, "No, but that was in my report." Well, Whittam pressed him further. But Detective Olson didn't even ask you to verify how long they'd been housed together or even whether they ever were? Is that correct? Correct. That is correct. And then Whittam circled back to the reason for the cell search, the phone call from Loretta, who claimed to be Nate Harris's significant other. That one tip had kicked off a search and ultimately led to the discovery of the letter. Whittam made a key point. All inmate phone calls are recorded. Tablet messages are saved. But Detective Olson never requested any of those communications between Nate and Loretta. Hudson confirmed that she did not. And so while the call with Loretta cracked the case wide open, no one had actually gone back to verify her claims. Whittam didn't let up. She pushed Sergeant Hudson on the decision making that night. You don't even verify who Loretta was before creating a ruse, did you? Hudson admitted that he didn't. His priority, he said, was protecting Nate Harris, and that's why he staged the search under false pretenses. He didn't want the other inmates to know he was looking for something tied to a murder case, because in jail, the rule is simple. Snitches get snitches. He didn't tell the other deputies either. Why? Because even a quiet conversation between staff could be overheard by an inmate, and that risk was too high. You went to great lengths to protect Nate Harris, Whittam said. Correct, Hudson replied. Then the envelope itself came under scrutiny. It wasn't just a letter tucked inside. There was also a property sheet, but it didn't have Nate's name on it. And it didn't have James Craig's name on it either. It was someone else's altogether. Inside were also papers with James's contact information, his phone number, and his email. On redirect, the prosecution stepped in to clear a few things up. Yes, there are cameras in the jail, but they don't record inside the individual cells, only the common areas like the day room. And even then, the footage isn't exactly high tech. The cameras are grainy, low quality, and there's no audio. They're really just there to catch major incidents, fights, assaults, emergencies, not for detailed surveillance, not for tracking conversations. And next up on the stand was Kazzy Harris herself, Nate Harris's ex-wife. Oh, yes. Quick drink, and we will get into it. Bonnie, I see your thing. This case is completely insane. I couldn't agree more. Thank you, everyone, for sticking with us each night as we follow this case, this trial. All right. We hear from Kazzy Harris herself, Nate Harris's ex-wife. Prosecutors showed her a letter and asked if she recognized it. She said yes. Back in November of 2024, she received it in the mail at her home. She started to open it, but stopped. The envelope marked as Exhibit 74 was addressed to her from Jimmy. Kazzy testified that she later spoke to Detective Bobby Olson and then placed the letter under her porch mat so a police officer could come pick it up. She was clear that she doesn't know James or Angela Craig. She's never met them, never spoken to them, and doesn't know anyone else involved like Casey Bohannan. The prosecution asked if she'd ever done anything to help James with this case. Her answer was a flat no. Had she ever met with his defense attorney, Harvey Steinberg? Also, no. And finally asked her, do you have any control over what Nate Harris says to anyone while he's in jail? She responded with a laugh, I do not. On cross-examination, Kazzy Harris clarified that she and Nate are still legally married. So much for that ex-wife thing. But they have been separated for some time. So it feels like an ex-wife. She's known Nate for 25 years and told the jury she has a pretty good sense of who he is. In 2024, she said Nate was in and out of jail and battling drug addiction. When asked about his credibility, she didn't sugarcoat it. She said Nate has a reputation for lying. And next on the stand was Carrie Higseath, a mom and a Lyft driver who met James Craig in the fall of 2022 through a site called Seeking Arrangements. And she explained that it's a sugar baby, sugar daddy dating website where both parties agreed to a relationship that involves an exchange, time and companionship for financial support. Carrie said that she doesn't jump into anything quickly. She usually spends a lot of time chatting online, of talking on the phone before ever meeting someone in person. With James, they talked for a couple of weeks before meeting up at the Bonefish Grill for dinner. And after that, they saw each other in person about 4 more times, usually nice dinners in Denver, followed by a hotel stay. Carrie said that James's dating profile said he was married but separated, and he told her the same, that he was no longer with his wife. Carrie testified that their relationship did include a financial component. James gave her money, helped buy meals, gifted her children $100 each for Christmas, and even bought a car for her daughter. He also helped pay for her attorney fees so she could finalize her own divorce. And then the conversation shifted to what James had shared about his marriage. He told her he was unhappy and trying to figure out how to get divorced, but said the financial side of things would be nearly impossible. According to him, splitting assets would leave him completely broke. But one moment during their time together stood out. Carrie said that James brought up the movie The Purge, where, for one day, all crime is legal, even murder. And he told Carrie, that if the purge were real, he would kill his wife. That's what he told her, according to Carrie. He went even further, saying he knew how to get away with murder by injecting someone in the neck with a substance. Carrie said he never mentioned anything about Angela being possibly willing to self-harm. Some of Carrie and James's text messages from January to February of 2023 were entered into evidence. And in one message, from message to message, in January 4th, 2023, James wrote, "Hey, so big problem. Ange found the Doubletree hotel receipt. Saw that I bought your daughter a car, the Venmo transfers, and the attorney fees. I told her I was just helping you and we weren't sleeping together, that you needed help out of a dangerous marriage. I don't know if she'll try to call you or not, but I just wanted you to know I'll have to go silent for a while. If you do get a call, now you know what I told her." End quote. But that explanation he gave his wife, that there was nothing sexual going on between him and Carrie, wasn't true. Carrie testified that they were indeed sleeping together. On January 9th, after Carrie didn't respond to his earlier message, James resent it, this time adding more. He wrote, quote, So I've just had to lay low and I still need to keep doing that. I'm sorry. I'm not mad. I'm just doing damage control over here. I'm so glad you're loving your attorney and doing well. I've been worried about you. End quote. And then on January 14th, he sent another message. I'm sorry you're so far behind in everything. I can't help right now. I don't see a way out for me. I'm really depressed about it. End quote. Carrie testified that she thought James was talking about being trapped in his marriage. She responded, "Sweetheart, please don't say that. I know the feeling, but you have so many reasons to live." End quote. She thought that James might be the one who was possibly willing to self-harm. But James replied, "I'm not happy. I can't get divorced right now. I'm not going to self-harm, just stuck." He also told her he wished he could give her more money, but said Angela had been snooping. She was able to sleuth and figure out when he was doing things, which made it harder for him to support Carrie financially. Carrie explained that during that time in her life, she was in a rough spot. She was broke, absolutely broke, going through a divorce and fighting for custody of her children. That's what led Carrie to seeking arrangements in the first place. She was just trying to survive. And I want to say, I understand. And I'm sorry, Carrie. And I'm sorry that she has to be testifying now, but I'm grateful that she is. More texts between James and Carrie from early 2023 were entered into evidence. In one message, James told her, "I hope you know I'm not putting you off. I still want to support you in every way, including financially. I just have to do something about the situation I'm in first." And Carrie took the situation, to mean his marriage. She even suggested he hide assets overseas and mentioned knowing someone who could help with that. And then on February 1st, James sent this chilling message. Quote, "Do you know anyone who can help me with a problem down here? I can pay handsomely. I want to be with you." End quote. Carrie testified that, based on the context of their conversations, she believed he was referring to his wife. She responded, quote, "I think you should hit up a homeless person." End quote. She explained on the stand that she meant someone who had little to lose. And the next day, February 2nd, James replied, quote, "Hitting up a homeless person actually sounds like the only choice right now. I made $66,000 in January, and I was desperate to share that with you. I feel trapped." End quote. On February 9th, he wrote, quote, "Sorry, I'm okay. Just really trying to put out a lot of fires at home. That's why you haven't been hearing from me. I can't get together right now. I hope everything's going okay." End quote. And on February 13th, he said, "Oh, geez, babe, I so wish I could figure crap out over here. I could help you in a heartbeat. I'm just stuck." More texts from James to Carrie continued to show his emotional spiral and possibly hint at something more dangerous. On February 14th, so on Valentine's Day, James wrote, quote, "This day is honestly killing me. I want to be with you, and I know money doesn't solve everything, but I had some really profitable months, and I hate thinking of how much I could help you, but I can't get the money into your hands. I feel hopeless, especially since you're on the brink of homelessness. If we can solve my problem, we could be together. If nothing else, so I can finally help you and your kids." End quote. And then in a second message, he writes, "I'm sorry if you ever thought I expected you to meet me for free. I know this is an arrangement. I hope your resourcefulness may be able to help me with my problem in some way." And after February 18th, Carrie said she cut off contact with James completely. She never spoke to him again. So in cross-examination, defense attorney Moses circled back to how Carrie and James first met through Seeking Arrangement, a sugar daddy, sugar baby dating website. Carrie explained that it's a platform where people set up an agreement or an arrangement about the kind of relationship they're entering. She said it can mean different things to different people, but in her case, the arrangement was to date James, and in return, he would provide financial support or other resources. She said that some of their messages came from a Google phone number that James used. He changed numbers frequently, so not all of their conversations were captured in the evidence, but the ones that were show a clear pattern, intimate and affectionate. They regularly called each other babe and baby. Moses began reading some of those texts aloud in court. Carrie writes, "Missing you." James responds, "I'm sorry, I miss you too. I think about you every damn day. How are you doing?" Carrie responded by opening up about her ongoing struggle. She talked about her legal situation and said her ex was pushing her for hiring a lawyer by withholding child support. She couldn't cover rent and had to turn to the community for help. Her landlord wasn't happy. She was in a rough spot. And the defense zeroed in on the emotional tone of Carrie and James's messages. James often showered her with compliments, telling her how amazing she was, how strong she was, and how much he wanted to be with her. Moses asked, "Did that make you feel good?" Carrie answered, "Honestly, I'm not sure that it felt good always." End quote. The jury heard how James had financially supported Carrie during one of the most difficult times in her life. She was in the middle of the custody battle with her ex and trying to keep her kids. James gave her $5,000 to help pay for her attorney. He also gave her money for Christmas gifts for her children, paid for her daughter's car, and told her he'd give as much as he could. Eventually, though, things started to unravel. Carrie testified that once James's wife found out about the money, he told her he would have to find another way to get funds to her. He repeatedly said he wanted to fix his problem so he could help her and her children. And then Moses circled back to one of the most chilling things James allegedly said, that he would kill his wife if the purge were real, and that he knew how to get away with murder by injecting someone in the neck with a substance. It was such a bombshell moment. And Carrie said she didn't remember if she mentioned that specific detail when she first talked to Detective Olson. Moses pressed her, "You said nothing about him injecting someone in the neck." Carrie replied, "I remember telling them about a substance." Moses pointed out that she spoke with him multiple times, shared messages, and even knew James's online username, which was Jim and Waffles. But in all of that, he said she never once mentioned anything about an injection to the neck. Carrie held her ground. "I'd have to review the conversation, but I did tell them about a substance." On redirect, the prosecution asked Carrie to clarify what she had said during her interview with Detective Olson. They addressed the defense's claim that she never mentioned the purge comment, but after reviewing the records, everyone agreed she absolutely did bring it up. Carrie explained that in her interview with Olson, she talked about James mentioning using potassium something in an injection because it would be untraceable. The jury had some questions too. One juror asked, quote, "Did you ever think you'd marry James in the future?" End quote. Interesting question from the jury or from a juror. And Carrie answered, "Yes, we talked about that, about getting married someday." End quote. Next on the stand was Jordan Ivy. Back in late 2022, she was living in Colorado and, like Carrie, had met James Craig through the sugar dating site Seeking Arrangement. She said they went on a few dates, including dinners at nice restaurants and even on a trip to Montana. According to Jordan, it was a romantic relationship. James paid for everything, the flights, the Airbnb, the meals. He also gave her gifts, including a nice jacket, an iPhone, and money to Jordan. It wasn't anything too serious, but she got a sense that James felt otherwise. He texted excessively, and the intensity seemed a bit much for her. Their relationship fizzled out by early February, and they just stopped communicating. She testified that she knew James was married, but he told her he was unhappy. He talked about getting divorced, but she said she told him not to do that on her account. And later, Jordan submitted their text messages to investigators and spoke to detectives as they prepared for trial. She said James had expressed doubts about actually going through with the divorce. He made it seem like it was no longer an option, largely because of his kids and the financial burden it would create. On cross-examination, defense attorney Moses questioned Jordan about the nature of her relationship with James. She asked if they texted frequently, and Jordan confirmed that they did. She said she provided those messages to law enforcement during the investigation. Jordan said she viewed Seeking Arrangements as just another dating website. She also realized that James had been using a Google phone number to contact her. She said it became clear that James wanted to communicate constantly. He was texting a lot and came across actually as really needy. Their relationship did become sexual, and the messages reflected that, including flirtatious and intimate conversations. And what did Moses do? She read a few of their texts in court. One message from James read, quote, "I'm so glad I met you. You're so irresistible." And Jordan admitted that it felt good to receive that kind of attention at the time. They also discussed their trip to Montana. While they were planning it, James sent this on October 16th, 2022. Quote, "Geez, is this normal? To meet someone one time and start making plans for all of the things we'd like to do together? I hope this doesn't freak you out. I just really like you. I'm jumping in with both feet. Tell me if I need to slow down." End quote. And the next day, October 17th, he followed up with, quote, "Thank you so much for a magical evening. I still can't believe I found you." End quote. James continued to tell her how much he missed her, even sent her a song he had written called Enough. Remember the song? That song? Yeah, it's also the same song he sent to Karen Kane and even to his wife, Angela. So he can't even just send a song to one person or two. On redirect, the prosecution made one key clarification. Jordan never told James he needed to divorce his wife in order to be with her. And next on the stand was Detective Heath Graw, an officer with over 20 years of law enforcement experience, including time in internal affairs and the gang unit. He's currently with the Major Crimes Division in Aurora, Colorado, and played a role in the investigation into James Craig. We'll get all into it. Let me grab a quick drink of water. So Detective Graw testified that he went home to the home of Kazzy Harris, Nate Harris's ex-wife, or his not ex-wife, but the ex-wife he was no longer with in that sense, to retrieve a letter James had sent to her while he was in jail. And that letter was admitted into evidence as Exhibit 74 and dated November 12th, 2024, just days before James's trial was originally set to begin on November 21st. And in that letter, James thanked the recipient for all you're doing and then launched into a string of accusations. He blamed lead detective Bobby Olson and the district attorney for what he called lies and atrocities, claiming their actions had robbed him of important moments with his kids. He also accused his former business partner, presumably Ryan Redfern, of being jealous and opportunistic, and alleged that Ryan had tried to take over his share of the dental practice by accusing him of Angela's murder. He went on to suggest that their office manager, Caitlin, was helping Ryan, and wrote that she was someone who just wants to hook up with him. And then came a particularly strange part. James wrote that if the recipient was going to Photoshop any phone records, they should only include records from before December 1st, 2022, because everything from December 1st to March 15th was already in the hands of the district attorney and could be verified. Good to know. Detective Heath Graw continued walking the jury through the letter. James instructed the recipient that if there were to be any fabricated communication after December 1st, it should appear to come from the Text Now app, writing that those records are harder to verify. He referenced a recent jail visit from his then attorney, Harvey Steinberg, claiming that Steinberg told him the entire case hinged on finding someone who would say that Angela was either going to self-harm or had set him up with poisons. James wrote, quote, "Anyone and everyone who jumps into this gets paid, of course," end quote. And he didn't stop there. He added that if the recipient were to work details into her testimony during trial and believed it took extra skill, he'd be willing to honor that. That's in quotes, honor that with additional payment. This letter's wild, man. The letter also included a rundown of James's history of infidelity, detailing at least 3 affairs, one in 2009 with a patient, another around 2013 with women he met online, and then one between 2016 and 2017 with a bank worker. In each instance, Craig claimed that he offered Angela a divorce and was willing to give her the house, the car, the alimony. But he alleged that every time Angela threatened suicide to manipulate him into staying. He also wrote that Angela had no work skills or experience beyond serving as his office manager from 2017 to 2022. He pointed out that she never finished college and strongly implied that she wouldn't be able to survive without him. He then claimed that he discovered a notebook in which Angela had supposedly researched poisons, calculated non-lethal doses to make herself sick, and identified toxins that hospitals don't routinely test for. According to James, this notebook proved that Angela wasn't necessarily going to self-harm. She was just manipulative. But Detective Gross said that no such notebook was ever found during the investigation. In one key paragraph of the letter, James actually admitted to ordering arsenic and cyanide. Arsenic delivered to his home, cyanide to his dental office, but insisted he wasn't trying to frame Angela. He didn't blame her for the orders, but instead framed it on an explanation for her alleged behavior. Attached to the letter was another page labeled as an addendum, dated November 13th, and in it, Craig kept going, accusing and instructing. He warned the recipient about someone named Roger, calling him the worst jailhouse snitch ever, end quote, and claiming Roger had set him up badly. James then laid out detailed instructions how the recipient could download photos of Angela from Dropbox and use Photoshop to make it appear as though they had a close friendship. He said it would strengthen their credibility if they testified at trial. On cross-examination, though, the defense shifted focus to a backpack turned over to police by Angela's family. And what did this backpack contain? Several personal items belonging to Angela, ponytail holders, her Apple Watch, and even her museum membership card. But what stood out most were two syringes found inside. One was small, the other large, both filled with unknown liquids. The defense emphasized the potential significance of these syringes, hinting at an alternative theory or suggesting they could raise questions about Angela's own actions. Detective Graw confirmed that both syringes were collected and submitted for analysis. He said they were separated out for further examination as part of the investigation. And from there, the defense pivoted to the master bedroom desk in the Craig family home, signaling they were about to raise more questions about what was found or not found in James and Angela's shared space. On cross, Detective Heath Graw testified about the desk in the Craig's family's master bedroom, saying it contained a mix of documents, including medical forms, insurance paperwork, and what appeared to be a life insurance policy. When asked specifically about a spiral notebook, Graw said he didn't know what was inside. The defense then brought up a potential gap in communication. They asked whether he was aware that Angela's family had provided portions of her journal to Detective Bobby Olson, and Graw replied, "I don't remember hearing that." He clarified that while he worked on the case, Detective Olson was the lead, and he was not privy to everything Bobby Olson had received or reviewed as lead detective on the case. And so then next, the defense introduced exhibits Triple E, and Triple F, the two syringes they claim were found in Angela's backpack. Graw acknowledged that the syringes looked similar to the ones he collected from the bag turned in by her family. But he gave several key clarifications. He didn't personally label or package the syringes. He could not confirm whether these two exhibits were from the exact same syringes, and he couldn't rule out the possibility that these similar syringes were found elsewhere. He said that he didn't log or package the syringes himself and couldn't confirm whether these were the exact ones recovered. The state objected to these items, and the judge said, quote, "We're going to sustain as lack of foundation," end quote. So, in other words, without proper evidence, handling, or verification, the two syringes, Triple E and Triple F, would not be admitted. And I do agree with that. Where are these from? What do they represent? What are they filled with? Where is the foundation? So on redirect, the state circled back to the backpack, the one turned in by Angela's family. Prosecutors asked, "Do you know who was on the house surveillance camera carrying that backpack while Angela Craig was in the hospital?" Detective Graw said, "I'd be guessing if I answered." The prosecutor told him not to guess. And with that, Detective Heath Graw was excused. In other words, we can only assume who was carrying that backpack around and what was possibly even planted in the backpack. Although it was never answered in court, I think the implication is very clear. And what a way, in my opinion, to end the day in court. The trial continues tomorrow. Thank you to everyone who has continued with us. Like I said, it is my 5th live of the day. Thank you, everyone, following along with this trial. We will continue it up tomorrow. Stick with us. And as I always say, especially when it comes to Angie Craig, because it is such a sad, sad story. May justice be served. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.